Say it
I was
is
worried I
Nicole.
was gonna have to drive all the way
Nicole,
to northern Massachusetts.
we're ready? Okay.
Back to Jersey.
Okay, we will call the meeting to order. If we can have a roll.
Gino will be here in like 2 minutes.
Gino's coming?
Yes.
Wow, big night.
Said he's 3 minutes out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I was about to say Claire. Nicole, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Fuller.
Here.
Mr. Duran said he's coming. Ms. Littman.
Here.
Mr. Ashkenazi.
Here.
Now, how do we pronounce Jason's last name? Does anybody know?
Chamora.
Chamora. Okay, so Jason Chamora. Mr. DiGennaro.
Here.
Mr. Lineski. Mr. Pugielli.
Here.
Mr. Carmonica.
Here.
And Chairwoman Beal.
Here. Okay, if we can stand for the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the notice requirements of the open public meeting law for this meeting have been satisfied. A copy of the notice having been sent to the Asbury Park Press and the Coaster and filed in the office of the Township Clerk on July 21st, 2023. There is an emergency exit through the courtroom doors and 2 exits at the rear of the room. There will be no smoking. No new cases will be started after 10 o'clock p.m. and no new testimony taken after 10:30 p.m. All meetings will be video and audio taped and shown on the Township of Ocean's Community Cable Channel, Channel 22. Excuse me, on Verizon Fios and Channel 77 on Cablevision.
Wanda, would you like a cough shot?
Went down the wrong pipe. 1 second, sorry. All cell phones must be turned off, or if you need to make a call, please make your call outside the room. We have a resolution for memorialization. Kenneth Tawil, 7 Oakwood Avenue, Block 12.07, Lot 5. And Michael Giuseppe, 78 Cold Indian Springs Road, Block 159, Lot 43, amended. And I will offer.
I
I'll
think you need
second.
to offer them separately because I think there's different votes.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Because there were different meetings.
Yeah, yeah, let's just do a whole vote and then I'll go through it later.
Right, to see who's eligible and who's not.
Separate and just do one.
Okay, just do each one separate, then go from there. If you were not on the application at all, just say abstain. No votes. Remember.
We'll do Kenneth Tawil first.
Alright, so Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Duomo come here? Yes. Mr. Duomo?
Yes.
Ms. Littman?
Yes.
Mr. Ashkenazi?
Yes.
Mr. DiGennaro?
Yes.
Mr. Pugielli?
Yes.
Mr. Carmonica?
Yes.
And then Chairwoman Beal.
Yes. Next is Michael Giuseppe. I'll offer.
Second.
Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Duomo?
Yes.
Mrs. Littman?
Yes.
Mr. Ashkenazi?
Yes.
Mr. DiGennaro?
Yes.
Mr. Pugielli?
Yes.
Mr. Carmonica?
Yes.
And Chairwoman Beal.
Yes. We have an administrative approval request. The applicant is seeking administrative approval for modification for Brielle Avenue LLC Warehouse and Car Club, Block 184, Lot 1.01. Application is requesting a modification to install the asphalt roll curb in lieu of the concrete curbing originally approved by the Board of Adjustment. The attorney representing the request is Jennifer S. Krimko.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Typically, this isn't something that would come back, but the township engineer just wanted to make sure everybody was okay. Essentially, because it's a car club and we expect to be expensive cars there, they were concerned about the vertical curbs and cars hitting them and popping tires and the like. So what they're proposing is just a rolled curb. We did submit a detail, but I did print copies just in case you don't have it, as well as pictures of examples. I'm not gonna move them into evidence because it's an administrative matter, but just, the first is a photo of it. The second is the comparison of the curb detail. And then the last one is just the site plan, sheet 6, showing that it's around the perimeter. And that's really it. It doesn't change anything with regard to drainage or grading or coverage or anything. It's really just an aesthetic thing.
Okay, Mr. Higgins and Mr. Matlack?
I have no comment, it's an engineering issue.
Just to clarify, I know the statement you read said asphalt curb, but the detail is for concrete curb, which is preferred. And there's nothing in the ordinance that requires a specific type of curb on a private site, so I don't have any engineering concerns with it.
Okay. And, okay, this is the same one we received upstairs. Okay, any questions from board members? Okay. Any questions from the public? Questions or comments, I would ask. Okay, motion to close the public hearing.
It's not really a public hearing.
Oh, sorry.
It's just, they're looking for a consensus.
So I would ask if the board agrees to administratively allow it, then I would just ask you to have Colleen or Nicole or Claire just do a letter to the township engineer indicating that the board accepted it, and I think that's the only action we need.
I agree.
Okay.
Do we need a motion for approval then?
Yes.
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. DeLuca?
Yes.
Mrs. Whitman?
Yes.
Mr. Ashkenazi?
Yes.
Mr. DeGenaro?
Yes.
Mr. Puglielli?
Yes.
Mr. Cannavale?
Yes.
And Chairman Nicole?
Yes. Okay. Next case, Synagogue of Oakhurst Community, Inc., 1 Bayer Avenue, Block 12.02, Lot 1 in the R2 zone. Applicant seeks preliminary and final minor site plan approval to demolish the existing three-story synagogue currently existing on the property and construct a new 12,449 square foot building, including basement, which will house 404 seats with 2 full movement driveways on Bayer Avenue along with Bauer Avenue, along with related site improvement. Applicant also seeks to modify an existing deed restriction previously imposed by the Board of Adjustment, which in part restricts the use of the basement for stage only. Applicant proposed habitable space in basement. And attorney Jennifer S. Krimko.
Good evening again. For this record, Jennifer Krimko from Ansel Griminary, here on behalf of the applicant. And I know that there's a lot of people here, and despite the fact that I told the leaders of the congregation that we did not need a big turnout, apparently they all wanted to come out and see. So don't be overwhelmed by the numbers. This is not a lot of people carrying torches here. These are people that actually are congregants of the synagogue. By way of very brief background, before I start moving things into evidence, as most of you know, this was the Little Red Nursery School. I know it personally. I attended it in the early 70s. I won't give you the exact date, but it has been in institutional use certainly as long as most of us have lived in Ocean Township. And it's 2009. The synagogue came to utilize the existing building for a synagogue for a very small contingent of Sephardic Orthodox Jews who lived in the area. When they came before this board or your predecessors, there were conditions put on it. One of the conditions was at the time they had no use for the basement, and they just wanted to make sure that that basement was not going to be used for anything other than storage. The building, as you're going to hear, is probably 100+ years old, and in an effort to bring it all up to code and make it safer, and with more longevity, we're actually proposing to take that building down and construct a new synagogue. Since it is a new building, I think that arguably that deed restriction may or may not apply, since it was a deed restriction based on that approval, but to the extent that it applies, as you're going to hear through the testimony, we are seeking to utilize that space, so to the extent it applies, we would ask you to remove it. Just by way of a very quick summary, I have here tonight Jason Fichter. He's a licensed engineer and licensed professional planner. As is typically the case when he presents, he's going to just offer you his engineering testimony to start. We will then pause his testimony and allow the other witnesses, and then he'll come back as wrap it up or cleanup hitter for the as a professional planner. I also have the architect, Jim Monfort, as you can see, with the beautiful building, which is actually less stories high than the old red schoolhouse was. The existing one is three, and we're proposing only 2. I have a traffic engineer, Gary Dean, who will talk about the anticipated traffic and parking. And then most importantly, I have Morris Tabelli, who is a board member of the synagogue, who's going to offer you some of the background as to how we got here today and why the expansion is so essential so this congregation can continue practicing their faith. So with all of that as a background, I'd like to move some things into evidence, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
Okay. A1 is the survey by Insight Surveying dated 1/26/23. A2 is the preliminary and final major site plan, and just to correct the agenda, it's actually a major site plan, not a minor, based on the increase in the building size as well as the parking demand. A2 is the site plan revised through 4/19/24. A3 is the traffic and parking study by Dolan and Dean, and that is dated October 3rd, 2023. A4 is the stormwater management report by Insight, and that is revised through April 19th, 2024. A5 are the architectural plans by Jim Montefort's office, dated 10/19/23. In addition to those, and those were all on file and should be part of your packet, we do have some additional exhibits, and I'd like to move them in, and then I'll start handing them out. A6 is an aerial exhibit by Insight. It's dated 3/22/24. Where's Jason? You wanna help me? You wanna play Vanna? That's A6. A7 is a color rendered site plan overlaid on an aerial.
Well, I'm sorry, what was A4, A7?
A color rendered site plan on an aerial. A8 is a congregants exhibit showing the location of the synagogue as well as marking the properties of the congregants in 2024 within a half a mile from the property. And as you can see underneath, it has in parentheses 212. And then this is not a new exhibit, but just to the extent you wanted a close-up version of the color rendering, I printed those out for you as well. And plus, that way Colleen and Nicole don't have to.
Are you gonna mark the color rendering?
It's already been marked. Oh, no, I did mark it, you're right. That is A9. So, Madam Chair, I did get, I think it was either Mark or Jim before the meeting had indicated that you're going to dispense of the way it's typically done. Before I assume that, I wanted to check with you.
Yes, that's fine.
So we should just begin? Okay, fantastic. Don't you? Morris, come on up. Have a seat. Yep.
Chairman.
Chairman will have you swear or affirm, whatever you're most comfortable with.
Okay. And if you can raise your right hand, do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
Yes.
And if you can please state your name?
Morris Tabelli.
Okay, and Morris, I know that you're going to go through it with your statements because we worked very hard on your statements together, but you are a member of the current Board of Trustees of the synagogue who is the applicant and owner of the property.
Correct.
Okay, so why don't you share with the board your thoughts about why we're here and what your role is in the synagogue and why this expansion is necessary.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Good evening, esteemed members of the Community Board. I stand before you today as a proud member of the Oakhurst community, deeply invested in expansion of our beloved Synagogue of Oakhurst Community Center. My name is Morris Tabelli, and my journey in this neighborhood began in 2006 when my family and I purchased our home on Lewis Street, seeking a place where we could not only live, but also practice our faith with devotion and sincerity. When we arrived, the landscape was different. and the Orthodox Jewish presence in our neighborhood was sparse. As a devout Jew, one of the primary concerns for me and my family was finding a place where we could partake in Sabbath services and celebrate our holidays in accordance with our traditions. The synagogue, or the shul, as it is affectionately known, quickly emerged as the heart of our spiritual life, a sanctuary where we could gather with fellow believers, seek guidance from our esteemed rabbi, partake in charitable giving, and nurture our souls through prayer and religious study. When I first moved to the area, I remember that first summer in 2006. My wife and I and our 4 children moved into the neighborhood, and a relative of mine mentioned that there was an Orthodox Jewish synagogue a few blocks away on Bauer Avenue and was in walking distance for Shabbat services. That first weekend, I recall about half of the 90 seats, men's seats, were occupied when I arrived for prayer services Friday evening. The rabbi at the time, Rabbi Mavora, who also lived in the neighborhood, was welcoming, and his inspirational words after the services made me feel right at home. Fast forward almost 18 years later, the synagogue has close to 250 families who are congregants of the shul, and there is not enough room to accommodate all of them in the current building. Today, our Rabbi Ike Hannon, has been a guiding light for our congregation. His wisdom and compassion touches every aspect of our lives. His leadership, coupled with the vibrant community spirit within our synagogue, has fostered a sense of belonging and purpose among us and the residents of the Oakhurst community. Rabbi Hannon's deep ties to the community as the associate principal of the middle school division at Hillel Yeshiva further strengthens our bond with the Oakhurst area, as many families whose children he teaches are also members of the shul. Rabbi Hannon's commitment to the shul is evident from the fact that he and his family purchased their home on South Lincoln in order to be in walking distance of the synagogue, which is essential to the practice of our faith, as we don't drive on the Sabbath or holidays. Our shul must be within reasonable walking distance to our congregation. Throughout the year, our synagogue serves as a place of gathering, reflection, and charitable giving. During the winter months, our Sabbath prayers are a beacon of warmth and togetherness, with congregants walking to the synagogue to participate in the services that nourish our spirits and strengthen our familial bonds. Prayer services start Friday evening 15 minutes before sunset and last for 45 minutes. The prayer services are followed by inspirational words on the weekly Torah portion of the Torah given by the rabbi. The Shabbat services on Saturday morning begin at 8:30 and last for 2 hours. Services are followed by breakfast and post-service religious discussions led by the rabbi. There are also religious services for the children, which take place at the same time of the prayer services, where lively stories focused on the portion of the Torah that is being read during the particular week are told. Congregants return in the afternoon about 1 hour before sunset for prayer lectures led by a rabbi and evening prayer services. All of these activities are essential to the practice of our Jewish faith. In the summer, the number of attendees swells, reflecting the growth of our community and the increasing need for a larger space to accommodate our congregation. However, our current facilities have become increasingly strained as more Orthodox Sephardic families have made Oakhurst their home. The limited seating capacity in our sanctuary has left many congregants unable to attend services, denying them the opportunity to practice their faith along with our esteemed rabbi and denying other members the opportunity to worship together as a congregation. Many other activities have been impacted as well. As a result, it has become essential for us to expand our synagogue to accommodate the existing families in the neighborhood who want to pray with us under the guidance of Rabbi Hannon. Today, I am proud to serve as a board member of the Synagogue of Oakhurst and have taken this tremendous responsibility, along with my fellow board members and other leaders of the Orthodox Jewish community, to expand our shul for the good of those living in Oakhurst. The expansion of the Synagogue of Oakhurst is not merely a matter of adding more seats. It's a testament to our commitment to preserving our faith and traditions, nurturing our community, and fostering a sense of unity and belonging among us. By approving this expansion, You will not only be supporting the religious needs of our Jewish neighbors, but also affirming the values of inclusivity, diversity, and mutual respect that define our community. In conclusion, I urge you to consider the profound impact that the expansion of our synagogue will have on the lives of all who call Oakhurst their home. Let us come together in solidarity and support this endeavor, knowing that it will enrich the spiritual and communal life of our neighbors for generations to come. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Tabelli?
I do. You mentioned there's currently 250 families?
In the neighborhood.
Okay. For the Sergeant Martinez's report, can you just for the record, looks like there's concern about weekly events or other events not occurring on the Sabbath. How many people at a time will be attending prayer studies during the week? And will this synagogue hold large-scale events on non-Sabbath days, such as a wedding or fundraisers, etc., because 17 parking spots is completely inadequate to service?
Before he answers, just so you know, Ms. Beal, we were gonna cover that with our engineering and
Okay.
our planning, but just quickly, because it's a good point that you brought up. Currently, with all these families that are there, is it, and it's gonna come through the testimony through Jason, but is there, what is your biggest turnout, the high holidays or other?
High holidays are the largest turnout that we
Okay.
have. Summer
And,
months, I don't have.
and it doesn't mean that all 250 families are coming, it just means 250 families or so consider themselves congregants.
Correct.
And from a daily or a weekly prayer, on average, how many people come?
About a couple of handfuls, maybe 20.
Okay, and currently you have less organized and less parking than we're proposing. Is there any issue, or does everybody walk or ride their bikes?
Most of the congregants walk, they're in walking distance, and are able to ride their bikes.
Okay, and with regard to other events, unlike Mag and David, otherwise known as the Westfield Shul, this is not a catering facility. You're not going to be hosting weddings and bar and bat mitzvahs. This is purely to allow for pre and post religious service gatherings.
That is correct.
So you're not going to be having events that are unrelated to a religious service.
That's correct.
I think that covers it.
Any other questions from board members?
And I'll note that Ms. Martinez wrote the same exact comments for the Larchwood Synagogue and wrote the same exact comments for Mag and David about 20 years ago. So it's generally speaking.
Okay.
Perhaps we should send her a resolution or two so she understands how it works.
Leave that to Mr. Steinberg. Any other questions from board members? Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark. Jason, now it's your turn.
You can raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
I do.
Okay, and if you can state your name.
Jason Fitchter, I'm from Inside Engineering. I'm a licensed engineer and licensed planner.
Okay.
And he's been accepted before this board in both capacities numerous times. Your license is still in good standing?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Then before you hop on, let's put up your exhibits.
Which one would you like?
I think you could start with the congregants exhibit and just explain how that was created, and then I'll allow you to choose as we go through. So essentially, we asked the synagogue to identify the homes within walking distance or a half of a mile from the synagogue, and you highlighted those and you shaded them in
Cyan.
we can argue what color that is. In turquoise.
I apologize for the colors on the large format. It looked great on the screen. I think it looks good on the piece of paper, but in hindsight, you can't really see that very well. But what you'll notice is in the center, that's magenta.
I agree with that, Jason.
Yes, that's the subject property. And then we have a half-mile radius circle around the property, and then we highlighted the congregants' properties in cyan.
And the reason why the testimony from Mr. Tabelli is there's about 250, not all congregants live within a half a mile. Some will walk farther, some will ride their bikes, and, some may just come for the daily prayers where they could drive. Okay, so I'll let you, having everything being moved in, walk the board through what's existing there today from an engineering perspective and what we're proposing from an engineering perspective, and we'll take a pause before you get into the planning.
Sure. All right, so this is Block 12.02, Lot 1, otherwise known as 1 Bower Avenue. We are on, and I put up the rendered site plan. I forgot the exhibit number, but just to give you a perspective as we talk about
That's
this site.
A7.
So the property is a corner lot with frontage on Bower Avenue and South Lincoln Avenue. It's about 0.45 acres. We're in the R2 zone, which is known as the low-density single-family zone, single-family residential zone, and houses of worship are permitted as a conditional use in that zone. So a new, larger synagogue is proposed to replace the existing synagogue. The applicant is requesting this approval in order to accommodate their existing congregation, as you just heard a statement about. This congregation has grown since this building originally began to operate as a synagogue, which according to some past resolutions for the property was about 37 years ago. The existing building itself was constructed in about 1920, which suggests that an addition is not the right thing to do, because the building's now over 100 years old, which means the wiring is old, the plumbing's old, the structure's old. It would be much safer to construct a new building to the latest safety codes. Apologies. As part of the site plan, we're proposing an organized parking lot, controlled driveways, better site lighting, enhanced landscaping, a screened refuse area, and a stormwater management system. And we'll go through all that.
None of which exists today.
None of which exists today. The existing building is 3 stories, about 31.39 feet high. The proposed building is reduced down to 2 stories and 30 feet high.
What's it now? I missed that number.
Right now, it's 3 stories,
Got that.
31.39 feet high.
And it's gonna be 2 stories lower than 30, right?
30. 2 stories, 30 feet. For perspective, your ordinance permits 2 stories and 35 feet for houses of worship under your conditional use standards. And single-family homes in the underlying R2 zone are permitted also at 35 feet and 2.5 stories. And the architect's going to give you a full rundown on the inside and outside of the building. Since we're proposing a new building, we're going to make all new utility connections. We found that each utility is available along the property frontages and will be subject to the utility authority's direction. On the plans we submitted to you, we're showing that we anticipate that utility connections will be made from Bower Avenue for water and sewer, and then there's a utility pole at the intersection where we will pull electric and communication utilities. So for stormwater management, the property is not considered major development for stormwater management. What we did for stormwater is we calculated how many square feet we're over versus what is permitted for coverage.
And let me just interrupt, that's not a conditional use requirement. There is no impervious coverage requirement for the conditional use. You're basically using the impervious coverage requirements for single-family homes, is where we're over.
Right, the
Just to
bulk, the
clarify,
underlying
right?
bulk, correct.
Okay.
Yep. So what we did is we designed a dry well to capture at least the amount, runoff from at least the amount of impervious area that we're over, and we've exceeded that. Because conveniently, the proposed roof covers more area than we are over on coverage. So simply by capturing all roof runoff from the proposed roof up to the 100-year storm and sending it to the dry well, which is underground in the front yard along South Lincoln, we're able to make the property function as if it's compliant from a stormwater perspective. The existing roof has gutters and downspouts that discharge at grade. The proposed roof runoff will be collected in the gutters to the roof leaders underground right to the dry well. So that's a significant improvement because it's going to reduce overland flow across the property. In terms of parking, the existing parking lot, by my standards, really isn't a parking lot at all. It's just a paved area on the side of the existing building along Bower Avenue. There's no striping, and if we're to call the connection to the street a driveway, it's about 74 feet wide. trying to fit in how vehicles would park in that area. We estimate about 6 vehicles can fit. It's not striped, it's disorganized, it's inefficient, and for that reason, it becomes unsafe. The proposed parking lot follows standard design conventions. It's striped for 17 spaces. It has an ADA space. It has 2 standard driveways, both of which are 24 feet wide, which complies with your ordinance. We also have a refuse enclosure. The parking lot accommodates about 3 times as many vehicles. It's organized, it's efficient, and it's much more safe. Due to the site constraints at the existing synagogue, we're proposing conventional parking spaces at 9 feet wide by 18 feet deep, as opposed to what your ordinance requires, which is 10 feet wide by 18 feet deep. And that's one of the variances we're requesting. And we understand it's typically granted for low turnover uses like this, especially ones that don't have shopping carts. By strict read of your ordinance, we require 202 parking spaces. And that's calculated as the greater of 1 parking space per 50 square feet of gross floor area, or 1 per 2 seats. And I'm going to provide a lot more testimony on that later. Parking areas within any single-family residential zone are required to be set back from the property line by 5 feet. On the east side of the property, we have 3.4 feet, and on the south side of the property, we have 4.6 feet. So again, we're faced with the challenge of providing for the existing congregation within the limitations of the property. We believe that we accomplished that with the proposed parking lot, and for that reason, we believe that this waiver request is reasonable, particularly considering the proposed fencing and landscaping along the property lines. Refuse today is collected from a wheeled can along Bauer Avenue. We're proposing a standard refuse enclosure in the new parking lot. It's screened and it's fenced, and this is going to make for a much more organized operation, and it's going to remove visibility of refuse from the property. The existing site is lit by building-mounted floodlights only, which is a big no-no in land use. Our design goal was to provide lighting in the parking lot, at the driveways, along the walkways, and do it with downward-facing lights that have little to no spillage onto neighboring properties. To accomplish this, we're proposing 2 pole-mounted lights in the parking lot. They're only 10 feet high. They have house-side shields. We have 5 building-mounted lights on the building. They're mounted also at 10 feet high. And then as we get closer to the property line, we provided bollard lights at 3.5 feet high. They're all LED lights. They're all downward facing. The lighting design provides a safe and secure site without adverse impacts to our neighbors. So we're requesting a few waivers from your lighting requirements. The maximum average lighting level is permitted at 3.5 foot candles. We're at 3.7. The maximum to minimum ratio for lighting levels is required to be less than 12. We're proposing 14. The average to minimum ratio for lighting levels is required to be less than 5. We're at 5.3. Maximum lighting levels permitted within the adjacent right-of-way is 0.25 foot candles. We're at 0.8. And a setback of 25 feet is required from the side property line to light poles, where 4 feet and 8 feet are proposed.
Jason, based on the size of this lot and the fact that we're talking about averages and ratios, in your opinion, are any of these variances or waivers going to have any negative impact on the neighbors?
No.
This is really just a numbers game as to how the ordinance is written, and full compliance would be almost impossible without having an impact.
That's right.
Okay, in your opinion, what's being proposed is a better zoning alternative because it's lighting the areas that need to be lit and keeping the property lines from having any impact on the neighbors.
Providing for safety without impact to the neighbor, correct.
Okay.
They're gonna be timers. Lights gonna be timers?
They can be, sure.
It can be.
Yeah, okay. Is that what we usually require?
If the board requires it, sure.
Except for security lighting.
Right.
Yeah, the ordinance requires that the parking lot lights be reduced by 50% once the building closes. Typically, that refers more to retail stores, things like that, but it could be kind of interpreted for this use as well.
Okay.
and then, but providing a minimum of 0.2 foot candles in the parking lot area for safety reasons.
We would certainly, if the board were to approve this, agree to make sure the plan complies with what Ben just indicated, subject to his review and approval.
Keep going with that?
Sure.
All right. So all these various lighting design parameters are typically very difficult to achieve 100%, and that's why you commonly hear a lot of applicants come here and request relief from your lighting requirements. The design we prepared is very close to conforming with your ordinance, provides light where it's needed, and avoids light where it isn't. Again, we worked within the existing constraints of the lot geometry while working to accommodate the existing congregation. The lighting pattern is substantially uniform throughout the site. The solution for a fully conforming lighting plan, if that would even be possible, would be to add more lights, which we felt wouldn't be appropriate in this residential neighborhood. The lighting reference to spillage into the right-of-way is for the driveways in this case, which is very important for safety. So for these reasons, we believe the lighting design waivers are reasonable and the plan meets the intent of your ordinance for lighting and safety. In terms of landscaping, we made an initial submission. The plan that's before you tonight is our first revision. Mr. Higgins, in his first review letter, had a lot of comments about our landscape plan. We also, Ms. Krimko, received calls from a couple of neighbors that had some comments about landscaping. So we took all of that, revised our landscape plan. We had a landscape architect prepare it, which your ordinance actually requires. Just for perspective, the original plan proposed 13 plants. The revised plan in front of you tonight proposes 140 plants, as well as a beautiful no-mow grass mix on the east side of the synagogue. The plantings are focused on the adjoining properties in the parking lot and framing out the property. We also updated the plans to specify all turf areas are to be sodded. That was another comment that came up. So we believe this new landscape design is going to create a beautiful and functional aesthetic.
Jason,
Yes.
do you have a percent of landscaping on the site that's being provided?
There is, I know there's some standards for percentage. I don't have those numbers. We did check them and they all comply.
Okay, now does what is the impervious coverage on the site compared to the total site?
Approximately 44%.
44%,
Right.
okay.
Correct.
And I just want to comment to the board. I'm looking at my report. My report says a variance is necessary from impervious coverage. And quite frankly, for this use, there is no impervious coverage limitation. And the reason for that is that the limitation is established by the minimum landscaped area, which is 25%. So if they exceed the 25% landscaped area for this use, then that variance for impervious lot coverage is not necessary. The ordinance limits impervious lot coverage for single-family residences, but that doesn't apply to this use, and that's consistent with the rest of the ordinance, where if a use is not a single-family residence, there is not an impervious lot coverage requirement. It's dictated by the landscaping requirement.
But as was offered by Jason, that notwithstanding, because it is in a residential neighborhood, we still propose the drainage structure so it would function as if it was at the same coverage of what a single-family home would be. And that's under your new ordinance, where it reduces the coverage and applies it on gross lot area instead of buildable lot area. Correct?
Yes. Okay, for signs,
And Jason, to the
Yeah.
extent that Jim has any more comments or wants any changes on the plans, or the Environmental Commission wants changes on the variety, we would work with them to ensure compliance.
yes.
Okay.
All right, so for signs, the applicant's proposing a modest freestanding ID sign. It's located at the intersection of South Lincoln and Bauer Ave. The sign itself is 32 square feet, which is just under half of what your ordinance permits. So it conforms with your ordinance. Your ordinance also permits one facade sign per street frontage, and with that, a total of 85 square feet per frontage for those facade signs. Since the applicant has been overwhelmed by the generosity of several donors that make this project possible, they're hopeful to provide additional facade signs to modestly recognize those donors. These signs are focused on Bauer Ave and the proposed parking lot with minor additional signage facing South Lincoln. You're going to see these signs on the architect's plan when he presents them in a few. The signs themselves are architecturally tasteful and attractive, and they complement the building. And that's all I have for engineering.
From engineering.
Madam Chairman, I have just a couple questions. Going back to the stormwater management, my report indicates that so I know you had the testimony about handling the stormwater management, the amount of impervious over what is allowable on the lot. It's the township's standard practice is to address stormwater management for the increase in impervious for residential lots. And I know that this does not qualify as a major development, but is there any way to mitigate stormwater management and collect more runoff, particularly because the parking lot, it appears, drains entirely into Bauer Avenue?
Yeah, I mean, the building footprint itself is a little over 5,000 square feet. We're capturing that entire building and putting it underground into a drywall, so there will be no runoff from that building. I believe if it was to be analyzed, we'd see that as an improvement over the existing condition. I think that the runoff from the parking lot makes sense. Get it away from the neighbors, get it out into the public infrastructure. I think that the dry well and taking the roof out of it should be a substantial improvement. I mean, I like in projects like this that aren't major developments to focus on grabbing roof runoff and putting it underground, because that is a stormwater system that has longevity. When you start grabbing surface runoff and putting it underground, you get into much more intense maintenance requirements. Certainly we could do it. I think that the site would probably function a lot better if we just focused on the roof. But I don't say that lightly. I say that with the thought in mind that the building footprint itself, I think, is substantial from a stormwater perspective to remove all of that runoff and put it underground.
Are there, the trees that are proposed on site, are they intended to be taller than the roof where you would need gutter guards and things like that? Or will they grow taller than the building itself?
I believe the ones out by the street would grow taller. The ones in the rear, I don't believe so. Gutter guards, if they're necessary, we could certainly add them.
Yeah, we could agree to that. Should the landscape architect confer with Jim and determine that they're necessary, we can add them.
How are you collecting the water on the roof?
So the water hits the roof, hits the gutter or a scupper, whatever the architect.
So it's a gutter system, not a roof drain system.
Yes.
So we've seen 100-year rainstorms all over the place. Gutters aren't going to collect all the water.
They can, and actually I have a note
They
to.
won't.
Well, they can if you put a large enough gutter system on there. If they're undersized, you're absolutely right, but we can make that work.
And my other concern with drainage off the parking lot, so you're shedding all the water from the parking lot to the street. Cold weather, it's going to freeze. All your congregants are walking in and out of the site. They're not driving. Concerns, ice.
I would be concerned about ice if it was an existing condition that was flat, where water and snow would hit the ground and sit there and freeze. We've graded, this is a new parking lot, so we've graded it to drain to the street, so we should not have standing water. We should not have that issue.
And where it hits the street, how does the street drain?
The street has a gutter that drains, I believe it's toward South Lincoln, if I'm not mistaken.
It's in good working condition.
As far as I know, I haven't heard or seen any issues out there.
May I make a suggestion, Mr. DeGennaro? We will certainly walk the area with Ben, and if he determines that a inlet or something is necessary, and we can do that during construction, and it can either be Ben or it could be the town engineer. We don't, obviously we want it to be safe for the congregants, particularly in inclement weather, so to the extent that that's needed, that is something that we could add.
Yeah, I mean,
And I don't know we'll know that until we get into more construction details.
I mean, my opinion, we should be collecting as much water as we can. We shouldn't be shedding it to the street, so.
Are you gonna have planning testimony on the D3 variances?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
A little bit.
Mr. Matlack, I would like to propose something with regard to the lights to you and the board. In light of the current climate, I know we were discussing lights on timers. I would like to propose that, for safety and security's sake, the focus be on safety and security as opposed to dimming the lights low. And safety and even though I realize people won't be there when the lights get low, I think the focus should be on safety and security of the building against vandalism at the moment. If the board is okay with that, and if you're okay with that.
Yeah, so the ordinance section that I referenced before is intended to protect for security, reducing the parking lot illuminance to 50%, but keeping a minimum foot candle ratio of 0.2 is intended to allow light for, police driving by to be able to see what's going on in the parking lot. And then the other aspect of that is actually illumination of the building or, potentially security cameras, whatever that may be. That might be something different that maybe we need to ask the architect about.
I just want to make sure if adjustments need to be made, that everyone's okay with that in light of the current climate. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I would assume in addition to the parking lot lighting, there are security lights around the building,
Yes.
which will stay on all night.
Right, and the site lighting oftentimes can be morphed into security lighting, turn that one off, leave that one on, 50%, that kind of thing.
Any other questions from board members?
Yeah, just about the garbage pickup. Is it moving more towards like a commercial garbage pickup where someone's gonna come collect it, or they're still going through the town?
That's a good question. I don't know if it's going to be public or private. The refuse enclosure that we designed could accommodate either. It could accommodate cans, it could accommodate a dumpster, so whatever works. Obviously, if public pickup is available, that'd be the preference. If not, they can do private pickup.
All right, just want, if it's private, just make sure the timing aligns with
course.
normal garbage pickups.
Yes.
Of course.
And would there be any temp structure built, since the structure's coming down completely? Would there be a temp structure built for
It's a
worship?
fantastic question. It's a question I don't know the answer of. Why don't we call it Mr. Tabelli for a moment?
I don't know if it affects any variances, they're building something temporary on the site or anything.
We've permitted tents in the past.
Okay.
for the holidays.
It would be a tent for the
And
holidays.
there's nothing either for that.
No, we would get the tent permit as
And there's a-
required.
Right, there's a specific permit to use a tent for X amount of time, and there's safety requirements that go with it, and that, the board doesn't rule on that, it's a general ordinance, basically.
Thank you.
And we've done it before for different houses of worship.
Is there gonna be an irrigation plan? I heard, the original plan was a small amount of landscaping. Now it sounds like it's a very large amount. So is there irrigation in the plan?
We don't have a plan. We don't typically do them at the board level. Once they get to construction, they bring in the contractors. They typically make the
But,
decision at
excuse
that
me,
point.
it's required by your ordinance, and yes, we will have irrigation.
That answers my question.
She just told the engineer.
Any other
I'm not
questions?
close enough to kick him otherwise.
I don't know if I missed this, but are there, like, hours of operation?
The hours of
Typical, yeah.
yes, well, Mr. Tabelli had offered that. It's typically, around the sun.
Okay.
When the sun comes up and the sun comes down is when the prayers are, and then it's, the learning before or after that.
There's also daily prayers in the
Right.
morning and afternoon.
Right.
But he's talking about 20 people, that usually,
Right.
that's the handful he's
Okay.
talking about 20 people.
And so that will kind of dictate what the parking lot lighting reduction and things like that.
Is there gonna be staff during the day, or?
Yeah, I imagine the rabbi's gonna be there. The rabbi will have an
Secretary.
assistant of some sort. There'll probably be
There's
someone
offices.
for building maintenance, sure.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thanks. Are there any questions from the public, Madam Chair?
Questions from the public? Thank you.
All right, we're gonna save the pretty pictures for close to last, and we're gonna, nope, not yet. We're gonna call up Gary Dean real quick. I'm gonna leave you with the lasting impression of how pretty the building's going to be.
Good evening.
Okay, if you can raise your right hand, do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, if you can state your name for the record.
Certainly. Gary Dean, D-E-A-N. I'm a licensed professional engineer in New Jersey with an office in Ocean Grove. And just by way of qualifications, I've been practicing for roughly 40 years. I've served as the municipal traffic consultant for Asbury Park, Freehold, but on the private side, principally in Long Branch, Freehold, among Howell, among other locales in Monmouth County. But I believe this is my first appearance before you.
But you have been qualified as an expert in the field of traffic engineering in multiple boards throughout the state.
About 450, yes. And I am a licensed professional engineer, and my license is current and in good standing.
I'm familiar with Mr. Dean. I knew him when he had hair.
40 years of land use will do that, yeah.
That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins.
I'm getting there.
Okay, we will accept.
Gary, you created a traffic and parking study that we moved in as A3, and recognizing the testimony from Mr. Tabelli about how much people walk and ride their bikes, could you just give a brief summary of what you expect, what the roadways can or can't handle, and whether or not the parking will be adequate, just based on this very specific operation of an Orthodox synagogue?
Certainly. And just by way of identification, that report was prepared by me, and it's dated October 3rd of 2023. As I'm sure the board is familiar, traffic engineers typically go out and do traffic counts, and we look at peak hours, most often during commuter hours. However, given the nature of this application, we focused on a little different time, not so much to capture automobile traffic, but to look at the site in general and to ascertain the absence of any traffic impact. And as you've heard from the applicant, essentially during their primary periods of service, there is no automobile traffic, and that congregants are walking, which is what we observed. We nevertheless did and were present at the intersection of South Lincoln and Bauer over the summer, representing a peak time for activity, given the seasonal nature in the area. Very light traffic on South Lincoln Avenue at the time, early on a Saturday morning. When I say early, 10 o'clock in the morning. A lot of bicycling activity, a lot of pedestrians and people out recreationally, but obviously the congregants arriving and departing. The application to increase the capacity would not affect traffic, obviously, for those times. And as you've heard from the applicant, the attendance at what would be the peak times for a traffic engineer on weekdays will be consistent as it has been, where this application is not proposing the increase in capacity to accommodate that activity. It's principally for the high holidays and regular services. So it's actually a summary of the absence of any material traffic impact, largely because of the Orthodox nature of the congregation and the absence of individuals driving. On the weekday, as you've heard, there may be some people who drive. It would be consistent to what we observed. And on the day we did study, we noted 9 vehicles were parked on the site. I can't ascertain who those individuals were, but again, it's a low enough use that the 17 spaces that are proposed will be more than adequate. As you've heard from Mr. Fitchter, and for anyone who's seen the site, I would describe the driveway and parking lot as antiquated and certainly not meeting any current design standards. It's just wide open blacktop. And the whole objective, as you've seen from the site plan, is to organize, stripe, and provide, I'd say, an organized amount of parking for the use. But beyond that, in reviewing what we did see, I'm pleased to say we really didn't see anything. And I would expect that to continue with the proposed expansion. And that is all I have. There are other concerns in terms of improving the frontage, but that would be, as was discussed, with the possible need for drainage improvements. But beyond that, Mr. Fitchter and I would work with your engineer or the township engineer to address those if needed. That is all I have.
Okay, questions?
How many spots? Okay. Go ahead.
I just have one, and I think we've
Certainly.
done this before, Jennifer. Are we deed restricting this to an Orthodox?
Yes,
Jewish
so
synagogue?
there
Because-
currently is a deed restriction, and in my notice and in the application, I asked to modify that deed restriction only in
Basement,
part.
to the basement,
Right, as it relates to the basement. We are not seeking to lift the deed restriction for this to be used as an Orthodox Jewish house of worship. And to the extent the board would like us, if they approve this, to re-record the new resolution with that in it, we would be happy to do that.
Yeah, this will prevent the building later on being a non-Orthodox Jewish where people drive, or another religion purchasing it and practicing there who drive. So the restriction was limited to Jewish Orthodox, which do not drive during the Sabbath and other holidays. So that's an important distinction, and we've done this before for several others.
Agreed. Any question? Oh, Mr.
How
DeGiorno.
many spots are in the lot now?
Fewer than 17, and part of the reason I can't answer is I haven't laid it out. It's unstriped. It is smaller dimensionally than what is proposed. So, I mean, if I had to throw a number at it, I'd say it's probably on the order of 14,
Oh, so Jason,
12.
Jason said 6.
It's all blacktop, so, you know, I look at it as the traffic
Let
guy
me ask you a
to say-
question, Gary. Are you talking about you could fit 14 cars
Correct.
there? That's not the question. The question is if you were to stripe it as a legal parking lot, it would be,
Well, that's fine. That answers my
Yeah.
question. Is it ever full?
Not that I've seen, no.
Any other questions?
Thank you for your time.
well, let's see if there's anyone in the public who has any questions.
Questions from the public?
Time for pretty pictures.
Yes. Now I have the pleasure of introducing you to Jim Montefiore. You do need to take a microphone, though. Jim, you got one over there?
Hello.
Okay, if you can raise your right hand, do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
I do.
Okay, and if you can state your name?
James J. Montefiore, architect, 733 Route 35, Ocean Township, New Jersey.
And Jim, you're a licensed architect, and I know you've testified here before.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Okay.
State of
Assuming
New
no
Jersey.
changes with credentials? All good?
Well, he had that one little incident. No, I'm just kidding. There was no
No
incident.
judgment, no judgment.
Sorry, Jim.
I'll get to the outside first, but to me, form follows function. So I know there were some questions about how the entrance of the building functions, and so I wanted to go over that with you. So basically, our building took shape based on the property because it had a skew, and I want to face both streets. So it created this kind of an angle to the building, and then I just followed through in the sanctuary to create a V shape, which is really good for acoustics, and it also pitches down so the acoustics goes up to the mezzanine, which is dotted in here. So what happens with the entrance here is that we have a main lobby. You go up half a level to the lobby for the sanctuary, or you can go up this way to the back side of the working area where the bathrooms are, the coat room. There's an elevator and a woman's bathroom. And then from there, you can go up to the ladies' balcony, or you could take the other stair up to the ladies' balcony. So in a building like this, it's really not that large. So you have a lot of egressing and functionality and handicap situations that you have to deal with. So in this situation, I was able to create one stair here with a gate that comes down in an emergency that blocks this stairwell off. And then this door is used by this whole level, as well as that door also.
So the building is fully handicapped accessible?
That's correct.
Okay.
Come in the main level, you can come in from the parking lot side or from the sidewalk side. Get in the elevator, it goes up half a level, down to the basement, or up to the second floor.
So let's just stay on the first floor. So on the first floor, we have, you indicated the coat rooms,
That's
the
correct.
bathrooms, and the main sanctuary. And how many seats are in that main sanctuary?
There's 230 seats on this level.
Okay. And what's on the second floor? And the second floor obviously is not the same size because it's a mezzanine that overlooks the main sanctuary, correct?
It's only 3,000 square feet up here.
Okay.
This is the ladies mezzanine that looks down. Again, we have our egress stair to the right, and then the other egress stair wraps around through here and down and out. We have the rabbi's office with a little library. There's actually 2 offices there, one for an assistant. Then we have a bathroom for the rabbi, and then we also have bathrooms for the ladies on the upper floor.
Okay, and we had indicated that we're seeking the ability to utilize the basement, so let's take a look at the basement. One of the things that Morris had testified is that after Shabbat services, for example, on a Saturday, there is a kiddush or a meal served for breakfast, and that we're proposing to do in the basement area, correct?
That's correct. Before I leave, there's 174 seats in the ladies mezzanine.
And so the basement would serve, one, for the post-service gatherings, and then also, Morris had testified about the children's services that would give a large area for the children to learn, run, play, and pray during the services in the sanctuary.
That's correct. And
Okay.
this wall can be opened up later for the breakfast. Also, we have egress doors that come out the side. I think there was something mentioned about handicap ramp. There's no handicap ramp on this side. This is just egressing. There's one that comes out here and up, and then there's one that comes out from the main sanctuary and then goes down.
And then what are the other spaces in the basement?
So we have the daily prayer room as you come down, and then there's 2 hand wash sinks. There's a men's bathroom here, ladies' bathroom on the other side, and the kitchen in the middle.
So it's your understanding that for daily prayer, where there may not be as many attendees, they might not use the main sanctuary, they might use that smaller room?
This is the room.
Okay. And we can stipulate that those rooms will never be used at the same time, obviously, because our parking and all our testimony is based on the main sanctuary.
What do you mean there won't be?
What I'm saying is we're not going to have multiple things going on at once. It's one service.
You wouldn't put the kids in the small.
Well, it
playroom?
could be. I'm saying for
I
the
mean-
adult services.
Okay, adult.
That's all, for the adult services, I
Can you,
apologize.
Jen, or can you clarify that? How many occupants you could have in the building at any given moment? Like a maximum occupancy?
Well, how do I do that?
You mean from a fire code?
Well, if you,
Standpoint?
there's a lot of plumbing fixtures on these plans.
That's correct.
So I assume you base that on the plumbing code, which,
No, more of the need.
okay,
and the
so then
plumbing code.
then that would be my question. Can you quantify this situation that you just brought up where you might have full attendance in the sanctuary and then all of the children?
Well, you would have the 200 seats upstairs, and then the ladies, and they would come down here.
Meaning the kids would be in the smaller area downstairs, and then they'd have to leave that larger area open because that's where the breakfast is.
Yeah.
So they couldn't have congregants in that area because there's gonna be tables and chairs and setting up breakfast. That's not an area for prayer.
Okay, I'm just trying to get to the proposed actual number of people that could be in the building, because it's not the 400 seats.
Yeah, it is.
Well, based on the way there can always be more than the number of seats, just like
Right.
in here, there's a certain number of seats, we could all stand here and we could pack it in, and the fire code would allow more people than could comfortably sit here. But this is being designed to accommodate the number of seats that are there, plus whatever children would attend.
All right. And just for the rest of the board, that's very open-ended. 400 seats plus whatever children.
And respectfully, it's not open-ended because your ordinance actually require, in a house of worship where there is, where people do drive, they don't require parking for other areas of the building. They only require parking for the sanctuary area.
They're anticipated as ancillary uses, not as a major use to the building itself. The building itself is the prayer sanctuary.
Correct.
And everything sort of goes off of that.
Right, and
And I just want to,
wait, and could I just add one more thing, Mark? Just to add to that, I think what's important to note is we've been here for 37 years, and, you know, we could fit a lot more people in there than the number of seats that are there now, and it doesn't occur. The intent is not to have that occur here. The intent is to use this as a synagogue and then have the space for all of the accessory synagogue uses that go in concert with the prayer services. As it relates to any concern with the number of people, as you heard from the testimony, all events that occur here will be around religious services. And any of the religious services that have a very large turnout would be the holidays, and the congregants can't drive. So the only concern would be more people walking or riding their bicycles.
That's my concern, is 600, 700 people, a third of which are children, that are having to walk to and from the site at the exact same time.
I'm not sure that that's a, how do I put, let me think of the way to say this. I'm not sure that the number of people who want to practice their religion is something the board can control, and the people all live within that neighborhood anyway. They're all going to be walking anyway. So this is just giving a safe area to have everybody, instead of having a situation where you have a small building that's 100 years old, that's not up to code, packing the same people into the building.
So the kitchen is small, right?
It's not big, yeah.
Yeah.
You really can't use that kitchen for massive catering facilities.
Well,
No,
we've already indicated we're not
No,
going
you're
to.
not, but it's really designed just for what, the breakfast situation.
That's what it's designed for, yes.
Yeah. How big is that?
Those same members are there now,
It's
right?
Correct.
21 by 18.
Yeah, which is,
Small.
my kitchen is that size.
Yeah. It's tight.
Right, so that is a built-in design that you can't really have catering,
It's not a commercial kitchen.
not a commercial kitchen, that's the word I was using, yeah, thank you.
So, as we go up to the roof, it's not all gonna be gutters. We have a large amount of flat roofs at the building. Those will have roof drains, and they'll go into the building. The only place that pitches down is a sanctuary roof over here. So the water will be collected at the bottom. I'm not so sure I'm gonna necessarily, I might use some roof drains and then a scupper to take, if it gets clogged, to take the water down into the system.
But to address Mr. DeGenero's concern that Jason didn't have that information on, we are gonna have roof drains, and we're not intending to have just the gutters around the perimeter to take on the 100-year storm.
That's correct.
That makes me feel better.
Okay. Let's talk about the beautiful exterior.
Okay. So our building is designed to complement the neighborhood with materials that are indigenous of the housing in the area. So we're using stone, and we're using synthetic wood and stucco for our building materials to have a more of a residential feel. This is like a siding material that's synthetic wood. And what you see here are our donor signs. They're on my elevation page, and they're not illuminated. They're just fastened letters to the building, metal letters that are very subtle. And what we've done here, if you look at the elevation, is we've designated areas of and sizes of those areas for each sign.
So it's really not intended to advertise or to bring attention to it, it's more for the congregants to see who was kind enough to donate and help make this project happen.
That's correct.
Similar to the DSN project, I think we're all familiar with, where they're channelized letters that are actually affixed to the wall.
Yes.
And that's similar, and they would be some type of metallic or otherwise very subtle color that blends with the architecture.
Well, they'll probably be like a metal,
Right.
some sort of metal. And then at the bottom is our freestanding sign, which is very moderate in scale. It just has the synagogue name on it.
And the overall height is 30 feet, where a house could go in this location at 35 feet.
That's correct. And we do have screening for the mechanical units, so you don't have to look at the mechanical units.
Are there any questions?
Okay, questions from the public? Okay.
Okay. Ready.
Thank you for your time.
You're still a licensed planner.
Still a licensed planner.
There were no incidents between the time you were here,
Nope.
notwithstanding the drains.
I was under Anthony's protection.
Okay, good. Excellent. You heard all the testimony. You obviously were integral in preparing the plans. You testified how this presents from an engineering perspective. Now let's put your planner's hat on and talk about the variances we need and the planning support that, in your expert opinion, you think exists to justify those variances.
Okay. All right, so from a planning perspective, obviously the crux of the application is that we require a conditional use variance, which is a D variance, a use variance. Historically, the use on this property has required a conditional use variance, and this application doesn't meet those same conditions as with the past applications, not surprisingly. It's important to keep in mind that the use, the property, and the congregation already exist on this property. We're just proposing to accommodate the modern congregation with an adequately sized synagogue that can meet the congregation's needs. Houses of worship are conditionally permitted in the zone. The application doesn't meet all of the conditions of your ordinance, and that's why the D3 conditional use variance is required. The proofs for a conditional use variance are different than would be required for a D1 or a D2 variance where the use itself is not permitted. In the case of a D3 conditional use variance, the use is permitted. We need to demonstrate to you that this property can accommodate the proposed development despite not meeting all of the conditions of your ordinance. It's also important to note that houses of worship are an inherently beneficial use, and this is a significant designation that is defined in the municipal land use law, which in part reads, quote, "a use which is universally considered of value to the community because it fundamentally serves the public good and promotes the general welfare," end quote. This is discussed in the New Jersey Zoning and Land Use Administration book, municipal land use law in New Jersey. They say, quote, "churches and other places of worship," end quote, "are found to be inherently beneficial." And Mr. Higgins acknowledged this, the fact that the use is inherently beneficial in his review letter as well. And Jim, please jump in if I misstate you anyway.
I think the municipal land use law actually states that houses of worship are inherently beneficial. That's what I'm checking right now.
Yep.
It does.
It's not a case law. It's deemed it.
Look at Gino.
Go ahead.
Yep, okay, we'll keep rolling.
Find it, yeah.
Places of worship are also protected under what's known as the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, which is affectionately known as RLUIPA. That is
not necessarily affectionately by the towns, but generally that's what it's called.
well, yeah, everybody loves acronyms. This is a federal law that, among other things, provides certain protections in zoning for houses of worship. The expansion being proposed here is necessary for the congregation to exercise its religion, which is protected under RLUIPA. The federal statute only permits denial if it's the only way to protect public health and safety. There is a provision in the federal law that allows you to make exceptions, such as variances for religious uses, in order to remain consistent with RLUIPA.
And before you go any further, in your opinion as an expert engineer and from the perspective as a planner, is there any threat to the public health and safety were this board to approve this?
Not that I see.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. The applicant is open to reasonable conditions to mitigate the variances if you do see fit to approve this application. We recognize the use is encouraged by your zoning because it is conditionally permitted. Or said another way, the use is considered harmonious with this neighborhood. The conditions of the conditional use that we don't meet are lot area. You require 2 acres, we're at .446. Lot depth, you require 200 feet, we're at 67.
Jason, just, that those are existing conditions that can't be changed. Correct?
Skip them, correct.
I don't think he meant skip them. I think he meant
No,
to
I just
indicate
meant
that
they're different than the other 5 conditions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Such as the next one.
Yes.
Minimum buffer from parking to a residential zone is required to be 25 feet. 0 feet exists, and we're proposing 3.4. This is an improvement over the existing conditions. Your 2009 resolution stated that landscape screening is adequate for screening the parking lot. Your 2007 resolution and your 2009 resolution found that landscaping and fencing mitigate the need for a buffer. A landscape architect prepared the landscape plan for this application specifically with the intent to create an attractive property and to buffer the neighbors. We're proposing new landscaping and fencing to remain consistent with your past findings. The minimum front yard setback, which we're measuring from South Lincoln Avenue to the proposed window wells, is required to be 56.9 feet. We're at 26.33. This is a technicality because the window well is part of the structure, but it's at grade with little to no visibility.
So what's the setback to the actual building itself?
Yep, so the minimum front yard setback from South Lincoln to the building itself, also required to be 56.9 feet, is proposed at 30 feet. And then the rear yard setback is required at 13.4 feet. We're proposing 10. And then lot coverage, are we skipping that one?
Well, no.
Have we determined?
No, that's building coverage.
Okay.
So under the ordinance, lot coverage is listed at 30% under the conditional use standard.
Yes, okay, so.
And when you read the definition of lot coverage, if it's not saying what it is, it's building. So it is the building coverage, correct?
Yeah, so maximum lot coverage, which, as Jen said, if you read through the ordinance, it's referring to the building area as a percentage of the buildable lot area.
Correct.
Yes. So your ordinance permits 30%. We're proposing 44.4%. For the front yard and rear yard setbacks and the lot coverage on this undersized lot, we tried to strike a balance between providing a building that will accommodate the existing congregation and providing as much parking as possible. Mr. Higgins commented in his letter he has no concern with this variance as long as the areas are adequately landscaped, which we provided on the updated landscape plan.
And additionally, Jason, when you're over in building coverage, by reducing the height of the building from what's permitted from 35 to 30, you're also reducing the overall visual impact.
That's correct. Yep, the massing of the building.
Can I
Jason,
just
did
ask?
you discuss the front yard setback from Bauer Avenue? I know you talked about Lincoln, South Lincoln. It's,
No, I don't think I did.
okay,
You're
yeah,
correct.
just for the record, you should be.
That I believe complies.
Again, it's the 56.9 feet
So I think,
required, so
wouldn't it
17 feet
be
is proposed.
from Bauer Avenue, wouldn't the requirement be 16.75 measuring depth from Bauer?
The way the ordinance reads, it's lot depth, and the lot depth in this case
Is the narrower?
is the deeper one.
Got it.
So
Okay.
it applies lot depth to both
Yes.
corners, even
Yeah,
though one
yeah,
is
yeah,
narrower than the
yeah.
other?
One's width and one's depth.
Okay.
So it's technical.
Right, so we're
Yes.
meeting the intent,
Yeah, meeting the intent,
Right.
that's correct.
Okay.
Before
So, yeah,
you-
but
Before you go on, you mentioned the 44.4. It's listed here as 58.5, or is that separate?
So that was, on our plan, we had listed it because we calculated the buffer wrong.
Okay.
And we consulted with the buffer that's supposed to be deducted from the gross lot area to buildable lot area. We're using Jim's numbers.
So the 44.4 instead of the
44.4 is
58.5?
correct.
Okay.
that's right.
We were more conservative.
All right, so, carry on?
Yes, please.
Okay, all right, so maximum lot coverage. So this would be impervious coverage as a percentage of the gross lot area, so the entire lot. Your ordinance permits
45%.
45%, right?
And that's the one I don't
Yeah,
think is
let's,
necessary.
okay, so we'll skip over that
Yeah,
one.
Okay.
I don't think that's necessary.
So we're out of here on that one.
Intended for this type of use, it was only intended for single-family residences.
It's not necessary, and the landscaping mitigates.
And the landscaping and the
And the
drainage
drainage.
improvements that they've shown really are consistent with the intent of the ordinance.
Okay, so.
Now we're moving on to-
page 15.
Yep. Maximum number of curb cuts. Your ordinance permits 1, we're proposing 2. This was previously approved. It's purely a function of the geometry of the lot, being that along Bauer Avenue, the property is wide and shallow, and that's the basis of a hardship here on this variance. Having 2 driveways enables us to provide the maximum amount of parking on this undersized lot, so that gets into the better planning alternative, or the C2 criteria. The minimum parking setback from the street is required to be 25 feet. I guess the existing parking lot would be 0. We are proposing 8 feet. We have a landscape island in there you can see on the plan. Again, this one was previously approved. It's also a function of the lot geometry, and that's why this has a hardship element to it. To mitigate this variance, our landscape architect creatively designed the property to enhance its aesthetic appeal, and we're also proposing to improve what exists today. Mr. Higgins made a comment in his letter that he has no concern with this variance, again, as long as the area is landscaped, which we provided on the revised landscape plan. The minimum parking stall size, we talked about that earlier. You require 10 by 18. We're proposing 9 by 18. There's also a hardship element here in that we're trying to provide the maximum amount of parking for the existing use within the property constraints. Also, the better planning alternative is to provide as much parking as possible for the existing use in this existing congregation. 9 by 18 parking spaces are the most common size for all uses, including high turnover uses, and I always use 7-Eleven as the example. This is incredibly high turnover, commonly using 9 by 18 parking spaces. The parking spaces will be, as designed, will accommodate the proposed use. The minimum number of parking stalls. So again, 202 spaces are required. Geometrically speaking, I would say that 6 exist, even though they're not striped. We're proposing 17. First, let me address a question that came up in the review letters. So, and there was earlier testimony on this, but to put a bow on it, the synagogue is intended for religious services and accessory religious learning and post-service gatherings. There will be no formal school or camps, and the learning and gatherings are all related to the religious services being held. So considerations for parking are focused solely on these religious services. We recognize that the Jewish Orthodox religion prohibits vehicular travel on the Sabbath and holidays when attendance at its peak. There are other services that allow driving, but attendance is much lower at these services, and we anticipate that the proposed parking lot will accommodate all vehicles used by congregants for those services. Many will still walk since they live so close by.
As they do today, as was testified to.
Correct. It is an existing congregation. That's right. We're not introducing anything. The subject of parking is stated in your 2009 resolution, which also happens to state that on-street parking is available. And this is why congregants live locally, so they're able to walk to the synagogue. The 2009 resolution also stated the finding of fact that, quote, the site has functioned as a synagogue for the last 20 years without any parking spaces with no neighborhood complaints. And to my knowledge, this synagogue continues to operate without issue. The proposed parking lot is an improvement over the existing parking lot, and it's intended to serve the same congregation. We anticipate the proposed parking lot will continue to serve the existing use. Mr. Higgins acknowledged in his review letter that parking will not be of great concern during religious services. The maximum number of facade signs, you permit 1 per street frontage, and as I mentioned earlier, the applicant is hopeful to be able to recognize several very generous donors with modest facade signs on the new synagogue. These signs, again, are focused on Bauer Avenue and the proposed parking lot, with minor additional signage facing South Lincoln. And again, the signs are architecturally tasteful and attractive and complement the building.
So, Jason, now that we went through all of the variances as well as the reasons for them, let's talk about what we need to demonstrate, and that's whether or not it satisfies the purposes of planning.
Yep, so we need to demonstrate to you that if you were to approve this application
Before
and
you go there, I think you missed a couple in his letter.
Oh, yeah, let's go.
Okay, we talked about impervious coverage.
Right.
We don't need that.
We don't need that. Setback,
We got,
street,
we got location of curb cuts,
Yeah.
paving location restrictions, we got. Off-street parking, we got. Minimum landscaped area, we meet. We had indicated previously, we don't need that.
Okay.
The landscaped area along the front property lines and the side and rear property lines
Right,
and along public streets.
right. And again, I thought we went over that, and perhaps
I
we,
didn't recall that.
perhaps we missed it. So Jason, based on the constraints of the site, as and these variances were previously granted under the former, there really is no way to comply fully. We have a hardship there.
That's correct.
And by the additional landscaping we're proposing, is it your opinion that we are meeting the intent to the extent possible based on this hardship?
Yes, 100%.
And by putting the fence and the additional landscaping for the neighbors, particularly as it relates to the adjacent neighbors, we're addressing those concerns.
Yes.
And Jim seems to agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mulch, you will meet? The next one's mulching material, you gonna meet?
Yes, we'll meet the mulching
Well,
material.
that's my old report. Yeah,
Okay.
we've met that. It's a
Wait,
good-
yeah, we met that.
And the
Landscape plan, we-
they meet.
Yep.
They meet, I know, fence height?
The fence height is the only one issue. 12-foot section of the fence. is 6 foot
Extends
high,
into the
extends
front yard
into
to
the front
buffer the parking lot.
yard. Yeah.
Right, so we would ask for that variance. But it extends into the front yard, it's not really,
It follows the perimeter of the parking lot.
Right.
That was the intent.
Yes.
Yep.
and.
Okay, so,
That's it.
That was it.
Anything about the waivers we can get rid of?
So the
Gone.
waiver, the only waiver that's left now is the buffer plantings.
So they're screening the trash areas, they're
yeah,
providing
yeah,
sod,
yeah.
we'll have an underground sprinkler system.
Yeah.
So the last one is.
I think you're on the old letter, Mark.
Yeah, that's the old one, yeah, but that's okay.
Did
I
anybody give
I
you
emailed you the new one, so you'll have
Okay.
that for
Oh,
resolution.
It wasn't in our packet. We only had the old one in the packet. All right, so, buffer areas, what are we doing with that?
We just indicated that we're seeking a variance for that, but we're
It's a waiver,
improving
it's
the.
a waiver.
Okay, a waiver for that, but we're improving the existing conditions.
Okay, and Jim says we have adequate, otherwise we have adequate, adequate landscaping on the site to mitigate that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
okay, so in support of the variances that we're requesting, we have to demonstrate to you that we advance at least one purpose of planning that's defined in the municipal land use law. I think we advance a few, and I'll summarize them for you here. First one is, I believe this is an appropriate use and development which promotes the public health and general welfare. So by definition, because the use is inherently beneficial, this application, coming from the municipal land use law here, quote, fundamentally serves the public good and promotes the general welfare, end quote. The need for the larger synagogue on this property has been established. It will accommodate a growing congregation to reinforce and strengthen Jewish traditions, tenets, concepts, and culture through education and prayer conducted by learned individuals. This creates a sense of community and moral guidance that is widely recognized as inherently beneficial. A hot topic in the land development industry is the construction of unnecessarily large parking lots. The concern is the amount and increased temperature of stormwater runoff and the heat island effect. The proposed synagogue does not need a large parking lot. If one was constructed, it would not be used, and it would only be a detriment to public health and the general welfare. So using the Jewish Orthodox traditions to our advantage, we're able to promote public health and the general welfare by eliminating a large parking lot, and because of that, a 2-acre property is not necessary. We're securing safety from fire, flood, panic, and other natural man-made disasters. So again, the existing building was constructed in about 1920. By replacing it with a new building, we're able to provide a much safer building built to all of the current safety codes. This application goes a long way to improve the safety of the site. The congregation has grown since the existing synagogue was constructed. The building is therefore overcrowded during these services. The proposed building accommodates this growing congregation. The conventional parking lot design also creates a much safer condition as compared to the existing parking lot. Next one is we're providing sufficient space in an appropriate location for a variety of uses, both public and private, in order to meet the needs of New Jersey citizens. So again, this synagogue has been operating for about 37 years and has attracted people to this neighborhood. Based on past resolutions and to our knowledge, the synagogue has operated without issue to the neighborhood for that entire time. And for these reasons, this is clearly an appropriate location. Next one is we're encouraging the location and design of transportation routes which will promote the free flow of traffic while discouraging location of such facilities and routes which will result in congestion and blight. The congregation intentionally lives in very close proximity to this property, so they're able to honor the traditions of their faith and attend services without driving. Therefore, traffic generation of the proposed synagogue is limited, which advances this purpose. And lastly, we're promoting a desirable visual environment. The architect and the landscape architect created an exceptional, cohesive design which will certainly create a very aesthetically pleasing property. In terms of the negative criteria, it's always worth noting that the use is permitted. The use already exists and it serves the people of the immediate neighborhood and has been doing so for about 37 years. The property operated as a school long before it became a synagogue. Then sometime around 1987, it became a synagogue. It was acknowledged in 2007 that the synagogue was less intense of a use than the school. The 2007 and 09 resolution stated that the synagogue has always operated without issue in the neighborhood. The applicant has consistently been a good neighbor. They very much have a vested interest in enhancing this neighborhood because their congregation is the neighborhood, and this is reflected in the design of the property and the building. The conditional use requirements of your ordinances are for house of worship, which you define as, quote, a building or buildings where congregants gather to worship and practice their faith, end quote. It's not specific to the type of faith. This application is for an Orthodox Jewish synagogue, and that's the difference in this application. A large site with a large parking lot is not required because the congregants walk to most services to honor their traditions. As I mentioned earlier, for those services where driving is permitted, attendance is much smaller and has been historically demonstrated over the many decades at this synagogue, even with the increase in congregants. The 2007 resolution found that the applicant met its burden of proof because the synagogue functioned on the site for more than 20 years without complaints or negative impacts on adjacent properties. The 2009 resolution made that same finding. Traffic generation is limited. Mr. Higgins made a comment in his review letter that parking will not likely be of great concern during religious services, and that's consistent with our testimony. Parking spaces are sized the same as most parking spaces that people are accustomed to, and we mitigated lot coverage and setback variances with an exceptional landscape design and stormwater management system. And for those reasons, I believe that if you were to approve this application, it would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and would not substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan. And as you're considering the negative criteria, I always like to highlight that word substantial. You're not looking to see if approving the application would cause a detriment to the public or an impairment to the zone plan. You're looking to see if it would cause a substantial detriment or a substantial impairment. And I don't believe this application rises to the level of substantial in either case. And on balance, it's my opinion that the benefits of this application substantially outweigh its detriments, giving you the ability to approve this application with confidence. Thank you.
Board have any questions for Jason?
Yes.
A past board gave an approval with the restriction on using the basement. Can you speak to that?
That's true. They did. This application, that's not the intent. I think Jim went through what's happening on all levels.
Oh, yeah, no, he did, but like, is there planning reasons, or, you know, when you go through the positive criteria, positive and negatives of that, lifting that restriction? Is there any testimony?
Well, I think you have to look at the application in totality. You know, we're proposing a new building that has a certain level of use with a new parking lot, buffering, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The prior application had a different building, different parking arrangement, different congregation size, two totally different animals.
Mr. Fuller, and if I can go a step further, we don't need a variance for that. So when you say the positive and negatives for that, we don't really have to present the positive. No, but I'm just saying, just for the record, we don't have to present that. And again, we can speculate that at the time it was I'm hearing from the background it wasn't safe. From a code perspective, it wasn't safe, and also the operation may have been very different than it is today. Again, I don't know that deed restriction even applies here because this is a different building with a different operation. So the other thing that I can guess based on my experience for this board over the last 25 years in its varying forms is when it first came, it was the first time it had come, and they had been concerned about how it might operate within the neighborhood. And I think between '09 and now, we've demonstrated that it operates quite well.
John, it was 3 floors before. So,
Understood.
yeah, so they're just going down. and-
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, I understand. I just wanted to.
The concerns back then were the safety of the basement and the fact that if it was used, it might increase the intensity of the use beyond which the applicants were representing at the time.
Great.
Any other questions? Okay.
That's all I have, Madam Chair, subject to the public having any questions for Jason.
Okay. Questions from the public? Okay. Motion, just one quick question, Mr. Steinberg. It includes the conditional use, bulk, the waiver, and the deed, correct?
Well,
Yes.
the what?
The deed restriction being lifted.
I'll tell you how to vote.
Okay.
Yeah, but they're applying for everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just by way of very
Wait, wait. Does anybody from the public want to comment?
Comments from the public? Okay, seeing none. We're hearing none.
Close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Motion. Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Just very briefly, we have a long-standing use here for decades. The neighborhood has grown around it. You have a group of people who are Ocean residents who want to pray within their neighborhood. When we originally submitted the plans, there were concerns raised by the neighbors, there were concerns raised by your professionals. We've agreed to revise the plans to address all of those, as you heard. Based on all the testimony and particularly that of the planner, we would offer that it's inherently beneficial use. The site can easily accommodate the use with the continued restriction that it only be for the Jewish Orthodox faith who don't drive on the holidays. And we would be willing to agree to comply with Ben's letter as well as Jim's letter as it relates to all of the other technical details that weren't submitted. And I think, and I know it's not something that the board necessarily considers, but as this board knows, often when we have applications like this, much of the neighborhood comes out, everybody has an opinion and a thought, and as you can see, most of the neighborhood is the congregation, and there really is no neighbor even questioning the testimony, let alone having an opinion on it. So I think the board can take that into consideration as well.
Okay.
I'll move for a positive resolution.
I'll second. Just, let's do the D3 and all the variances that were related, that they don't meet the conditions.
Yeah.
The condition, move that one.
Okay, so move the conditional use.
Yes.
And was there a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
I'll do it.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Duomo?
Yes.
Mrs. Littman?
Yes.
Mr. Ashkenazi?
Yes.
Mr. Chimura?
Yes.
Did I say that right? Mr. Puglielli?
Yes.
Mr. DeGenero?
Yes.
Mr. Carmonica?
Yes.
Chairwoman Beal?
Let's see,
Wait,
that was
wait,
eight.
we need 7.
7,
Who's
yes.
the alternates here?
Yeah.
You don't need me.
I tend to disagree, Mr. Carmonica.
We need you, we need you.
You're so appreciated. Just want to let you know
Just call
that.
the first 7, not the alternates. We're fortunate to have more than 7 tonight.
Mr. Fuller, Mr. Duomo, Mrs. Littman, Mr. Ashkenazi, Mr. Chimura, Mr. DeGenero. No, you're not a
Chairwoman.
How about Madam Chair?
alternate.
Madam Chair.
All right, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Then somebody just move the bulk variances.
Okay.
That can't be part of the site plan?
No, it's just easier for me to do it the other way.
Okay, Mark.
I'll move for a positive resolution on the bulk variances.
Mr. Fuller seconded.
Okay, okay, are we going through it again or no? That's it?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
same, and then we
Mr.
start.
Fuller,
Yes.
Mr. Duomo,
Yes.
Mrs. Littman,
Yes.
Mr. Ashkenazi,
Yes.
Mr. Chimura,
Yes.
Mr. DeGenero, no, wait.
Yes.
You're an alternate.
No, I'm not. Yes.
Chairwoman Beal.
Yes.
Now, the site plan with the conditions that were agreed to.
Is that the waiver and the deed?
Yes, and the lifting of the deed restriction.
Well, we're gonna lift the deed restriction, but we're gonna require a new deed restriction to encompass that it would be for an Orthodox Jewish synagogue at all times,
Okay.
which would balance out the no parking.
I'll move for a positive resolution on what he said.
Se-
Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. DeLuno?
Yes.
Mrs. Littman?
Yes.
Mr. Ashkenazi?
Yes.
Mr. Chimura?
Yes.
Mr. DeGenaro?
Yes.
Six. Chairwoman Beal?
Yes.
Seven.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
I believe that covered all of them, right?
Yes.
Okay.
all covered.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And a motion to
Motion
adjourn.
to close.
Close. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.